Sylvia, thank you so much for coming and interviewing with me. I am so excited and I am just incredibly inspired by you. I'm going to let you do an introduction, but I just want people to understand how much you have been all over the state.
Mm.
It has been nonstop and it is incredible. And I'm so glad that we were able to kind of find a time when we had some overlapping time for us to get and sit down and everything. So I really appreciate it. And I truly am so inspired by how much work you've been putting into it and
Here.
how much of yourself you've been putting into it. So I'm really excited to chat with you. And I think our first kind of question is just, who are you? What's your background? What are things that you like to do?
Okay.
Just tell us who you are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm Sylvia Wright. I'm running for State Superintendent of Education here in South Carolina. I've been in education for over 20 years. I've worked on every single level, like classroom teacher, department leader, instructional coach, school coordinator, district coordinator. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. And so that's why I understand like parents want, what's best for their kids because I want what's best for my kids and my grandkids, And so as far as education wise, I have a bachelor's in middle grades education. I remember when I first started teaching, I realized I wasn't meeting the needs of all the kids in my class. So I went back to school and received my master's in education from Columbia College in divergent learning, which helped me, gave me strategies to meet the needs. I continued to move up in leadership, like I said, as a department leader. And as I moved up in leadership, I realized that there was a leadership problem. So I went back to school and received my master's in educational leadership from the Citadel. I continued at the Citadel, received my specialist in education, which prepared me to be a superintendent. I wanted to be a college professor, right? Because history is my thing. So I actually my husband's in the Air Force, or was in the Air Force. He's retired now. But I went to Texas Tech and received my Master's of Arts in history because like I said, wanted to be a professor. And I actually was with that degree. I was an adjunct professor for 3 years at Charleston Southern University. I'm currently working on my Doctor of Education, didn't I know, at the University of South Carolina in Systems Improvement and Innovation. And my dissertation is how can we improve the literacy rate of middle school students in rural areas who receive special services. So students in special education, because one of the things that I want to do in South Carolina with our education system is reform special education, especially with the cuts that are coming from up top with special education. It's going to be on the states to make sure like these students don't slip through the cracks. And so I take that very seriously. So
that's incredible. That is a lot of school. You were better than me. I could not keep doing that. I mean, hats off to you. And that is an incredible goal that you had too. And it really shows how important it is for someone who's running for a position like you to have that background and that experience, and also that love for the role. And so I'm really excited to hear your answers to some of these questions, because I think that we are missing a lot of really thoughtful answers to these types of questions. And so I'm excited to get into them. So our first question, I think that you know probably better than most that the topic of public funds being used for private tuition has been talked about a lot. It's gone to the Supreme Court in South Carolina, and it continues to be persistent and continues to kind of divide us, for many, divide us along that line. As superintendent, how will you ensure that the public tax dollars remain dedicated to the public school? And what specific oversight would you implement to prevent the misuse of those funds, such as vouchers or unregulated like education service accounts and things like that?
Perfect. Thank you. Great question. So it's very important that we start with the fact that in our state constitution, Article 11, Section 4 says that public funds belong, in public schools, that they cannot be used for private or religious institutions. And so in 2024, that was the first voucher bill, right? Was someone challenged, or a group challenged it. It was ruled unconstitutional. So, other people had to fund it. They could not use public funding. So fast forward, we have this new voucher bill where the current people in power manipulated language. And now they have this new voucher bill, which no one has contested yet. But again, there's a chance that if someone does contest it, that it's, going to be ruled unconstitutional. Because again, even though they put a trustee in place, because that was part of the manipulation to put that trustee in place, that way it's not directly, it's basically a middleman, but it's manipulation. But the bottom line is it's unconstitutional, but I'm glad that no one challenged it yet, because we're able to see that half of those vouchers went to students who are already in private school. And then you have that 1,000 that were homeschoolers who received the vouchers, who, through a loophole, the current superintendent, calls them unbundlers. But again, that's unlawful. She's manipulating, the system. Exactly. Manipulating the system. And so that's why I'm glad, because we could have said that all day long, that this is going to happen. This is going to happen. But now people see that it's happening. So now we can start working to, like you said, one of your questions, because it depends on who wins this election. Because if the current party stays in power as state superintendent of education, I'm still going to have to work with them with the regulation, or to try to provide better oversight for this. And which goes into your next question. One of the things that we can do, first of all, is see how we can put measures in place for instant, or not instant, but more consistent checks or regulation. Because I know there's an annual audit. So before we get to this annual audit, what are like little steps or little checks we can put in place to make sure funding isn't being wasted or misused? Another thing is creating like some type of individualized plan that the parents or people receiving these vouchers, they have to justify, where this money is being spent. I know how we need to also change the language of the current, or add amendments to the current laws or policies, because right now, how it's written, there's not a lot of regulation. So working with the legislatures to to tighten up regulations for the voucher bills. But back to fully funding public schools. And I just jumped around, so I apologize for that. Because the key thing for me is I believe that every parent has the right to choose wherever they want to send their kid, whether it's public, private, micro school, homeschool. But like we started out with this conversation, public funds belong in our public schools. And so the majority of the kids in South Carolina go to public schools. So my plan is to fully fund public schools. And what I mean by that is we need to start having conversations with the school districts, the teachers, the students, the community, the parents, find out what are the needs in our schools, and then provide those resources and support with progress monitoring, of course. See what's working, perfect. Let's keep going that way. If this program or whatever isn't working, okay, let's get rid of that and be more strategic and intentional about how we're spending money within our schools, because billions of dollars go into education, but yet we're still 43rd. 39% of students in our elementary school students are kindergartners. Only 39% demonstrate readiness. So my point is, we have all this money going into the system, but we don't have the outcomes.
Yeah, even just access to books sometimes.
Yeah,
the textbooks a lot of kids are sharing, and things like that. And so it definitely seems like it's a multi-tiered step, but that a big part of that is collaborating with the legislature and then also the school districts and everything. And it seems like you are probably pretty set up well for the job, right?
Oh, yes. Building relationships is my thing. Being in leadership, that's what you learn. Like, you can't just go in and be like, do this. It's that collaborative relationship. That's how you get results.
Incredible. And so our second question, you kind of touched on it a little bit, and and it's kind of mostly just like listening to these teachers and listening to these school districts. But right now, I feel like they're not doing a whole lot of listening to teachers and a whole lot of listening to the school districts. And so what we're seeing is a whole lot of state level intervention in the local classroom, whether it be from the book bans or whatever they'd like to call them, or trying to restrict how or what is taught like history and science and things like that. As superintendent, how will you protect the autonomy of the folks that work in the schools, whether it be the librarians or the teachers? And what will you do to ensure that the curriculum remains diverse and honest and in alignment with the truth?
So again, curriculum is my jam. So I love this question. As far as librarians, I'll start there. As a teacher, partnering with librarians were like the lifeline. And I was an English teacher. So I would partner with them for like research and writing papers. Like we were partners. So when the current superintendent immediately severed ties with librarians like day one, that was a red flag. It's obvious that she's never worked in the school system or worked as a teacher because like they're a lifeline. I say that because the first thing I'm going to do is reestablish that relationship with our librarians, with their association, and then continue to just strengthen that because literacy is going to be one of my initiatives. And we can't have a literacy initiative without our librarians. So they will be a part of that. I'll work with the librarians for that initiative. And when we talk about autonomy, they'll be able to just do their job because that's what they do.
Exactly.
They promote literacy and the love of reading. So just partnering with them for them to do what they do.
Yeah, what was already kind of established as their job. Yeah.
Exactly. And as far as teachers go with the curriculum, like you highlighted, right now it's more of a state control and indoctrination that's seeping into our schools, which the superintendent, that was one of her campaign promises not to do, indoctrination, but she's doing that. The Club America recently in headlines is further proof of this because we have PragerU. She also ended the African American, AP course. I mean, I can go on and on about how, like you highlighted, the state is, seeping in and taking this control. But again, that's part of that Project 2025 Trump agenda that the current state superintendent is pushing. So opposite of that, what I plan to do is implement a curriculum that merges career and our basic instructional skills. So I want a project-based critical thinking model for our kids. And as the district coordinator, I had the opportunity to merge a logistics course it was English 3. And doing that, it gave the teacher, I wrote up, I merged, like I said, the logistics curriculum with the English 3. And then the teacher had the autonomy to create the lessons, like how, and it's real world stuff. It's logistics. It's jobs that these students might be interested in. So I thought about that, and that's sort of the model that I want to use for elementary and middle. Let them do like a career exploration, like learning with like labs and things like that. Get them like excited about things, like about learning. And I'll highlight this. I've had the opportunity to visit an Electrical Alliance facility. They train people how to, do the electrical things for businesses and homes and all that, right? And it's like real world because they actually like go to sites and take what they learn and actually start building. It's work-based. Yeah, it is so awesome. This Electrical Alliance in North Charleston. But I was very inspired by that because the instructor told me the kids are learning trigonometry and they don't even know it. You know what I'm saying? So that's sort of my thinking when I talk about this merging of college or a merging of career and basic instructional skills, elementary to middle. That way it also gives students a chance to explore everything that's available to them. And I know I hear the argument of, well, AI is going to take a lot of those jobs. Yeah, but there's still jobs that they're going to need to know because AI can't do everything.
Yeah.
So,
and I've used many of the chat GPTs and stuff, they're not ready. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not ready. So we need to be prepared, and they need to be prepared. And why not do it in a way that is fun and exciting for them and makes them excited for their future?
That's right. That's right. So I look forward to, implementing that curriculum, just making school fun again. Yes, we can learn. Yes, we can learn through having fun. Real world experience is fun. Yes. Hands-on is fun. Having these labs, like I would look forward to going to school and knowing that, I have a hands-on and I'm still learning. And it's relevant to me. I might want to do this job. And if I don't, that's fine. At least know the options that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're saying that, like I think about my nieces and nephews and how exciting, like that just makes me feel as like knowing that if that's implemented, how well their education is going to be and how excited they're going to be to explore all of these different things. So I really am looking forward to that. And so our third question is, so I think we know, we have a really, really, really high teacher vacancy rate at this moment. It somewhat might call it a crisis. Beyond raising the salary, which many agree is necessary, even the governor agrees that it's necessary, what is your specific target number for that salary? And how will you protect the rights of the teachers to organize and advocate for better working conditions in a state like ours that's kind of restricts that for them?
Okay. So basic starting salary. Well, let me start with this. I remember being a new teacher and having to survive off of new teacher salary. And my husband at the time, he was enlisted, like lower enlisted. So that was like in 2003. And so they weren't making he wasn't making a lot of money. I wasn't making a lot of money. I remember we had a young son. Our son, Perry, was 3 years old at the time. And so I remember having to eat oatmeal for dinner because we wanted to make sure, Perry had what he needed and things. So, there were nights too, if I didn't eat oatmeal, I just didn't eat. I remember there was a time when we did have our lights cut off. Yeah. So I know how that feels. I've had to get a second job. I've worked as a front desk at a hotel before, just to, make some ends meet. So I say that because I can relate to the fact that our teachers starting out and as they go up need higher pay. So where I want to start as far as pay is $60,000. And then continue to rise from there. And we are moving in that direction. Like you said, the legislature, they're ready to work together. Again, we just have to fund that. And there's money here in South Carolina. People say like, there's this myth that we don't have money. It's not that we don't have money. Number one, we have money. We're just not managing it properly. Yeah. And number two, we're not putting it where it should be. So we can do it. We just have to be strategic and intentional about it. And having the right leadership in place, can help with that. And then as far as advocating for teachers, that's the job of the superintendent. Even though the current superintendent is not doing that job because she has an agenda that she's following, this Project 2025 Trump agenda. She's following that. She's not a superintendent who's representing the teachers, the students, the communities. But I am that superintendent who will represent, because I'm a teacher. I know how, like I said, I know how it feels. She's never been a teacher, so she does not know. She's never worked in the system. And so working in the system at all three levels, classroom, school level, and district level, I have a different perspective. I have of course, that respect for teachers because, I'm a teacher, and a respect for students, parents, communities. It's going to take all of us working together. And so that's what I bring to the table as a state superintendent of education.
Incredible. I'll probably say that a good bit, honestly. So for our fourth question, this is one that we've had a lot of conversations within the Young Democrats of the Central Midlands, because we have a lot of current teachers and also people who are still trying to go after their teaching certificate. And so they're trying to get through that education aspect of it. But during the practicum phase of their degree, where they're working full time in the classroom while they're also paying tuition, it becomes a major financial barrier that causes a lot of students to drop out before the graduation. As superintendent, would you support a statewide program to provide stipends or paid student teaching positions? And how will you ensure the path to becoming a teacher is financially sustainable for all students, regardless of what background they come from?
I love that. So to your first question, yes, I definitely support paid internships for teachers for the practicum. Yes. The second part of that is I want to take away student loans from them. Day one, I want to partner with universities and technical colleges. In exchange for 5 years of teaching in South Carolina, we fully pay their tuition. And of course, this comes with that $60,000, starting salary that I mentioned, and also tackling those workplace conditions, those things that are pushing teachers out. Mm-hmm. Because it's one thing to recruit them, and have the teachers come in, but we've got to keep them. Mm-hmm. And one way to keep them is what things are holding them back, or not holding them back, but adding that additional pressure, like the paperwork, unnecessary paperwork, student misbehavior, oversized or overcrowded classrooms, lack of leadership, lack of support. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, there are different pieces to this, but I'm not only looking at recruiting, getting those teachers with this 5-year agreement, but also retaining them. Mm-hmm. Making sure we set up conditions that make them want to stay and where they're satisfied with, loving teaching. Because I love being in the classroom. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, the only reason why I got out of the classroom is because I realized there was a leadership problem. If it weren't for that, I'd still be in the classroom because I love it. I love watching the lights go off when the kids get it, that light bulb. Yeah. Like you could see them like thinking. And then when they get it, it's like a look in their eyes, like, Yeah, yeah. So I miss that. But I know I'm fighting for for all, you know what I'm saying?
The greater.
Yes. Yeah. So that's how I would, help strengthen this teacher pipeline, because that's what we really need. Like you said, opened up in the beginning. Part of that is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a crisis as far as people not having their degree in education. It's more of, we have people who have their degree in education, but they're fed up. Mm-hmm. They want to be a part of it anymore. So it's also establishing that culture within our schools. That way, those teachers who are out there will come back.
Yeah, I agree. I have a good number of friends who got their teaching degrees, and then a few years in, they just couldn't handle it anymore because of all the things you just mentioned. So yeah, definitely retention is a huge thing, and I appreciate that extra comment on there.
Yes, yes.
All right, question number 5. So as we know, it's already hard enough when there's low budget and the resources aren't coming in to the schools. But there's also an issue if a student or students, if they feel unsafe or unsupported, they can't learn properly. They can't focus on what's important for them in that moment. How will you work to create a school culture where inclusion is more than just a buzzword, specifically by protecting rights of those who need it most, ensuring safe environments for the LGBTQ plus community, to also fulfilling critical academic support and federal mandates required for students with disabilities?
Okay. That's a loaded one.
Yeah, this.
So we can start with school culture. And with that, school safety is going to be one of my key policy priorities. And when you think of school safety, it's not just intruders. Mm-hmm. It's mold in the buildings. It's when it rains, it floods, and kids being rerouted, and it's also bullying. Like I said earlier, the oversized classrooms, the student misbehavior. And so going back to what you said about culture, that ties in with, school safety. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, if kids don't feel safe, it's hard for them to learn. Mm-hmm. And so one of the initiatives I'll say this, for school safety, I'm going to implement, or I'm going to have a school safety advisory council that's going to go out day one, once I'm elected, and do like an audit of where are issues. You know, because it's one thing to say what the issues are, but to really understand what's happening, paint a picture for us, and then create policies to make schools safer, to make school students, to build that sense of belonging. Like, what can we do? And the only way to really understand that is if we talk to students, talk to the teachers, talk to the people who are in the building, you know, and find out how we can provide or create this culture. I know for me, one thing that I would like to implement and work with local superintendents to implement, because again, as state superintendent of education, I can't just go in and be like, y'all do this, right? I can create policy, right? And have the oversight. Like I can have an expectation and then go in and, you know, make sure, like do that check.
Being met.
Yeah, the accountability, holding people accountable, right? But again, I cannot make people, you know what I'm saying? We learned that in leadership. Again, that's building those relationships. So what I would like to do and continue to do is build up relationships with our local superintendent, school board, you know, school leadership, teachers, and we implement things like Ron Clark Academy. I don't know if you're familiar with Ron Clark Academy.
No, yeah.
So we had this at the last school I was at. Everyone was a part of a team. So I was part of the green team. It was Isabindi, right? So team Isabindi, we would have like the older, and we partnered with the elementary. So our middle school and elementary, it was a rural school, so you know they were together, but we partnered with them. So the older kids were like mentors to the younger kids, and we had like this big ceremony like every other week on Friday, where there were new people who came to the school. They'd spin this wheel, and they'd be a part of a house, and then we'd cheer them on if they were like in our house. I know, it was like, it made you feel like you were a part of something.
Yeah.
And so these are things, and it doesn't have to be Ron Clark Academy, but I want things like that in every single school. And part of the reason why some schools don't have it is because of funding. I don't want funding to be a barrier for this, because this is how we build culture. This is how we built that sense of belonging. Because I'll tell you what, I have my little button for Isabindi. We had a chant. It was when I'd see the little elementary kids, I'd say, who you with? And they'd be like, Isabindi. They go crazy. And the teacher would be like, shh. And I'd wink at them like, yeah. So then let's see me at my way, because I break the rules with the, you know, to be allowed. But the point is every kid needs to be a part of something like that to build culture, to help them feel like they belong, regardless if they're LGBTB, special education, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Just every kid deserves to feel a part of that school community. And so we need things in place to have a foundation and then continue to build on that foundation.
Yeah, I love that approach. And I love that, like, the sense of community also kind of incorporates the sense of accountability to your house.
Yes.
So the students are learning that as well. And so it's like a whole ecosystem. It's incredible.
That's a great description, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. And then special education, you mentioned that. And like I said earlier, with the research that I'm doing with my doctorate, I want to reform how we do special education here in South Carolina. Right now, we're really operating on one continuum of service, and that's putting special education kids in one class without proper support and without proper resources. So we've got to do better. There's so many diverse needs when you talk about special education. And so we need to have a system in place to where we're able to meet the needs of the different, you know, students. And one way to do that would be partnering with our community resources. Like, we have hospitals that we can partner with that can provide services. That way the school districts, they don't have to pay for full-time, you know, people for like one kid.
Yeah.
You know, because I understand, you know, the budget.
Yeah.
So why not partner with, you know, hospitals, you know, and we work together, fully use our Medicaid funding, because we can use Medicaid funding and insurance to help, like, get these federal dollars, so that way it doesn't have to come all from the state. There are ways we can get funding to support our students who receive special services, to make sure every child has access. So,
yeah, and I feel like that idea of using the hospitals and the community would helps so much with the continuous logistics. Because like you said, with the resources, some years they have something and then some years they don't. And if you use the resources that are already there and cemented in that community, it allows that resource to be continuous for these students. And they can like really feel like they're being supported all the way through. That's incredible.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we're on to question 6. In an attempt to combat learning loss and the mental health crisis, South Carolina has implemented a statewide ban on cell phones in school. Beyond removing devices, what is your comprehensive plan, or what you have so far, at least? I know sometimes once you get in there, you build on it a little bit more, but what's your plan to expand school-based mental health services and decrease our student-to-counselor ratios, which at the moment are kind of exceeding the standards there?
Yep, that's right. School counselors, especially in the rural area, they have so many other hats that they have to wear beyond just being there for students. I've watched a counselor who's had to do like getting the testing monitors and all that stuff together, on top of planning award ceremonies and, just so many other things that are put on their plate. So what my plan is, I want to create, and some districts already do this, but every district should do this. So I want to create a policy where there's a counseling team. So the school counselor isn't alone. The school counselor will also have a mental health therapist, a psychologist, social worker. And I'm not talking about part-time. I'm talking about full-time. Even if, for example, in that county, they have a certain amount, like maybe 3, and then those 3 have at least 2 schools, no more than 2 schools, because I do understand funding. And this is also another case where we could lean on the community partnerships.
Yeah.
But my goal is to create policy, like I said, to expand this counselor team, so that way the school counselor isn't trying to manage all the mental health concerns for students. Career, because they also do that career training, education. Like, create this team, and then there's specific duties for each person. And also, with someone there being full-time, it cuts down on wait time. I'll never forget, there was one student, his grandma was dying, his mother abandoned him, he was absent, he was truant. And so come to find out, he didn't want to be in school, right? Because of those things that I just told you. And I found out through conversation with him. So after I found this out, I went to my principal, and I remember telling her, he needs to be seen right now by accountants, by, a mental health therapist. And she was like, yeah, he's on the waiting list. Like, what? And there's no telling how long that waiting list was, because I knew it wasn't tomorrow, the next, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because even if there was a wait list, okay, then he should be seen tomorrow, but that wasn't the case. So our kids need more access to mental health counselors, psychologists, and so they don't have to wait.
Yeah.
And another piece of this is SEL. Again, some school districts are already implementing SEL at elementary. That's social emotional learning.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of behaviors that we can combat that are happening at the middle and the high school level if we just teach our students, certain behaviors for, like, attitude. Like, if they're angry, okay, they know how the anger feels. Here's strategies to deal with it. I think of my grandson when I think of SEL. I'll never forget, he was like, I'm grouchy like the Grinch. I'm going to take a nap, right? And I looked at him and laughed, not in his face, but like, because I was standing from afar, because I heard him talking to my daughter. And I was like, so first of all, she's taught him the emotion of, grouchy, because he knew it was grouchy. And then a strategy to combat that, go to sleep, and then, get your mind right, and then wake up and you're, a better person.
Yeah. And just even being able to recognize that at such a young age is incredible, and having the tools to teach them how to recognize that. And it just how it, like, domino effects in a positive way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we can do it at that, because like I said, there are districts that are already doing it. So just making sure that more districts, are doing that. And then the final piece would be strengthening our MTSS, that multi-tiered systems of support for students. Because again, that's identifying the needs. So if a student, like I told you with that one student with his truancy was a red flag, him being absent because it affected grades, all the things. So we look at the data for him, find out what resources or support he needs, and then we can lean on the community to support that. Like, for example, with the mental health, if he's on a waiting list for the school mental therapy, how can we get someone from the community to
come in
to
supplement it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, we want our kids in school learning, so that way they can be successful. So we can grow them and they can be successful. And that's how we do that, by making sure we're meeting their needs and supporting them with the resources.
Yeah, and just that idea that like supporting them with those resources also means supporting those counselors. And that I remember being in school, and regardless if I was in elementary school or versus high school, the counselor was the person you went to, not just for like support and the career stuff, but it was also just like a breath of fresh air almost. You're like, I can like be in here and I can be a little bit silly, I can be a little bit goofy, and they kind of take it and they can like see you.
Yeah.
And having them have that support to support students is just it becomes this place where everyone feels like they belong in that whole ecosystem. So it's great.
And you bring up a good point too, because with the counselors feeling so overstretched and overwhelmed, that also could add to the fact of students not feeling that belonging, because again, the counselor is now being taken away from providing that time for a student just to come in and feel free,
welcome
and welcome. Yeah. I didn't think about that. So
look at we're strategists. And for this next question, speaking of support, we talk about a lot of the K-12 system, but and I know South Carolina has made strides in this with the income-based 4K and First Steps, that it's kind of like the supplemental thing for daycares to offer free 4K. But for a lot of people who kind of sit in that middle area,
right,
those families still don't qualify for the free 4K, and many of the current programs are only half day, or like you said about a couple of programs, it's like a long wait time with things. So as superintendent, will you commit to working with the state lawmakers to expand access to universal all-day 4K education, so that way every child in the state, regardless of their background, has access to it?
Yes, that's actually another one of my top policy priorities, because early childhood education is the foundation. Only 39% of our kindergartners are demonstrating school readiness. And like I said in the beginning, like millions of dollars has been pumped into this. And like you said, there's a whole group of students who do not have access to early childhood education. So what I will implement, work with legislatures to implement, is universal pre-K for 4-year-olds, regardless of income, regardless of where they live. We can do it. Florida has a model that we can look at in other states, because I want to look at other states and see how they're doing it. Absolutely. I just highlight Florida because I remember Florida was ranked, they used to be below us, but now Florida is above us in the rankings.
Okay.
And one of the things that they did was implement this universal pre-K. They also got rid of statewide testing, but we'll get to that later, possibly in a conversation. But we can look at what other states are doing and implement universal pre-K. And as we implement this universal pre-K, it's providing more resources to the daycare facilities to help them increase the pay for their child care development workers, because that's another part of my mission. I want to increase the pay for anyone who works with our students, with our kids, whether it's at the daycare level and the school level, of course, because the daycare workers are just as important.
Absolutely.
If anything, they're the foundation. Of course, the parents are the teacher first, totally, but the next step is that foundation, and so we've got to pay them. And I'll highlight this story. When I dropped my grandson off at daycare the other day, he had this teacher who taught him to, it's okay that your grandma's leaving. You don't have to like cry and act crazy, right? And so I was floored, like, because he was like, "Bye, grandma." I'm like, okay, because usually it's like a waterworks, right? And he's like clinging on to, they like have to get him. But he just stood there and said bye. And I said, I have to talk to this person. Like, see, what is this magic that you're doing? But talking to her, she just really cares about it, right? Mm-hmm. But then she told me that she might not be working there, because I asked her, what is your full-time plan? Like, what's your plan? What do you want to do? Because she loves kids, right? And she was telling me how she is about to switch careers because she doesn't get paid enough as a child care development worker. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's an awesome teacher. Yeah. And they're about to lose her because she's not getting paid enough. Mm-hmm. So we have got to increase the pay for these wonderful educators at every level so we can keep them in the classroom working with our children. Mm-hmm. And so that's my goal. That's my plan.
I'm so glad that you said that, because a lot of times when we talk about that salary increase for the teachers, a lot of times those 4K and, mm-hmm. and daycare teachers get left behind in that conversation. And it's really important. My mother is a 4K or a 3K teacher.
Nice.
And she also, the pay is pretty low, but she loves those kids and those kids love her. Mm-hmm. And the idea that other people like her, and educators like her can have the opportunity to be in that setting and also make a living, yes. Actually make a living, is incredible. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So for this next question, and again, a lot of this comes back to resources. But depending on a student's zip code, we see access to certain things like coding labs, mm-hmm. World language classes, or even like robust like art programs. We see in some zip codes, we see all of those, mm-hmm. access to all of those things. And then in other zip codes, we don't. How will you ensure that those opportunities, beyond just the physical tools of the supplies and things like that, how will you make sure that those resources are spread out across zip codes, and that you also fund recruitment for those specialized teachers who have the specialized education in the coding or in the arts? So that way students, like you said before, are excited for those programs and they can see a future in those programs.
Yeah, so what my plan is, I want STEM schools everywhere. It shouldn't, and I'm using STEM as an example.
Yeah.
STEM schools, we need arts integration, language immersion. There are certain districts that have things like that. Mm-hmm. And like you said, there's some that are not. I'll never forget, I was in this rural area. We were building a new middle school, right? And we wanted to see what it would look like when it was finished, right? So look at the inside. So we drove like an hour to a school in Charleston County, and we walk into their STEM lab, okay? The shelves were filled with things to make, projects. And the room was filled with the equipment to do it, right? And this is a middle school. We're in middle school too. This is a middle school. And I think about where I am in the rural area, they maybe had like 6 or 7 drones. We didn't even have a STEM lab. So all I could think of is how unfair this is, how they have this, these students they had a different advantage. And it's the same, they're middle school students,
yeah,
but at different experiences. So that's not right. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do is make sure that every child in every district, every community, they have access to a STEM lab, language immersion. Because I know kids learn differently, right? Mm-hmm. We all know that. But to not even have the option or access to it, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So making sure that students have access to these things. And as far as funding goes, there are grants we can utilize. South Carolina leaves a lot of federal grants on the table. So picking up those federal grants, seeing how we can be more innovative throughout our state. Because like I said, there's some districts that are already being innovative.
Yeah.
And again, they have funding too, like a Greenville or Charleston County, like they have funding to do that. But our rural areas, I want to deploy grant writers, like from the State Department, to help these rural areas get these grants so that way they can have more innovative opportunities. Their students can have access to these things that the other districts have. So that's sort of my plan as far as how I want to provide access and opportunity for every student, regardless of zip code.
I really, really like that. I love the idea of having the grant writers kind of come in and assist the districts, because I know that I'm sure the reason why you say that is because the districts already have so much going on. If they're already underfunded, or if they're already struggling. I went to school in Edgefield County, and it was a wonderful teachers, but severely underfunded. And I know how hard they all worked. And if they had a little bit of extra resources, a little bit of extra like manpower behind them to get those types of resources, I can't imagine how much more those teachers would be able to pour, and the school district itself would be able to pour into us, because they worked with a lot less and were incredible. So I can't imagine with that kind of structure what that would mean for all of these school districts.
I'm ready. I'm so excited for the
too.
possibilities.
Yes.
Yes.
When you talk, it makes me excited.
And we can do it. That's what really has me excited. Like, not just cocky. Yeah, like we can do this
With a plan.
That's
and you
right.
got it.
Right.
Okay, so you talked about this and you said we'll talk about it later. So let's talk about it now. So standardized test scores are currently the primary metric for school success in South Carolina. Do you believe that this current testing model accurately reflects the school's quality or students' growth? And if elected, what specific changes, if any, would you propose to the state's accountability system to ensure that not just this one testing instance, but the whole child is taken into account to determine if their performance is where it needs to be in their progress?
Perfect. So like I mentioned earlier, Florida got rid of their standardized testing. I also want to get rid of the SC Ready at the end of the year for South Carolina. They moved to a progress monitoring model. I want to move to that, but I'm calling it a growth model.
Okay.
And what that means is the students test at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. And we look at their strengths and weaknesses, and then we build on top of their strengths, of course, and then support and lift up their areas of need, right? And so that's what I'm looking at as far as growing students. Instead of this end of the year test where we don't get the data until like August, I don't want to test the test. We need to be more strategic and intentional about the data that we're collecting for students and how can we use it to grow them, because that's the goal, grow them. That way they can be successful and do what they want to do in the future, not what we tell them.
Yeah, and even just the way that standardized testing cuts into extra time that they can use to explore other interests and things. I know that even my niece now, she's in middle school, and they were talking about testing and how once you're done, they just fall asleep and things like that. And it's like, can you imagine how much it would open up to have those days back, and the teachers can actually teach or have those like supplemental days where they can explore new things. And so even just that idea of switching the structure can open up so many possibilities. So that's incredible. And so our last question, it's a pretty easy one. At least I think it is, because I know that you've been going around the state, and I know that every conversation that you've had with people has kind of built this answer. And so, ultimately, right now, South Carolina is towards the bottom. How do you see your administration pulling South Carolina and our education system out of the bottom tier of the national rankings to ensure that every student from the coast to the upstate has access to top tier education? And why are you the person to lead that?
Perfect question. All right. So to move us from the bottom to the top, first, we start with early childhood education. That's where it's at. Like I told you, that 39%, we've got to increase that. Make sure that every child has access and they have a start, right? A strong start for school, and then build on top of that. So that way they're successful. They're on a path to success, right? And then again, with the curriculum, making sure like we're giving them that access and exposure. So when they get to high school, they sort of have an idea of what they want to do instead of wasting that 4 years trying to decide. And, where they go into ninth grade, kind of know what they want to do. By 10th grade, If it's workforce development, they're out, apprenticeships, that work-based model, getting that experience, getting the certifications, working towards those certifications that they need. If it's the military, working towards the ASVAB, and of course, ROTC. If it's college, then taking whatever strands you need to be prepared for college. So basically, building that strong foundation, creating pathways of success for students, having that growth model instead of that end of the year testing, a growth model, so that way as they go through, we're growing them so they can be successful. And then of course, everybody working together, having those conversations with the community, the teachers, students, parents, school board, local superintendent, along with myself, we all are working together. That's how we're going to elevate education in South Carolina. And I am the person for the job, the best person for the job, because I have worked on every single level within our school system. I've done this work. I've implemented an intervention plan. And again, it took working together with teachers, students, community. But I implemented an intervention plan based on like that growth model I'm telling you about. We had iReady, which I know people have emotions about that, but I used the data from iReady to create intervention groups, right? And it was all hands on deck. Teachers' assistants had a class. I had it like 10 kids no more than 10 kids were in an intervention. And so when I first started it, when I go around and do the checks, I was reinforcing expectations for students and teachers. But then I also started showing them the data. Like, this is how the students are growing, and rewarding them for this. So there was buy-in eventually, right? And when I go around and do checks, I got excited because the students were learning, the teachers were, excited. You know what I mean? Like the vibe was different because they saw the results. And so at the end of the year, like I said, we went up 13 points. The school was unsatisfactory for at least 3 years. We went up to 3 points away from average. And people might think, oh, that's nothing. No, going up 13 points, it took work. It took us working together. So this is what I bring to the table, the relationships, the systems improvement. Like, I've done this. So I'm ready to elevate South Carolina from 43rd to 1st. I'm ready to change the whole vibe of education in South Carolina, and we can do it.
Yeah, a more excited vibe to education. And it seems like the resources are there. You just need someone who has the ideas and the ability to actually implement them because they are on their 7th degree and you know exactly what you're doing. And I just think that, like, as I'm talking to you, and someone who I don't have children and I'm not in the education system, but it makes me excited to think about the opportunities that these students will be able to have under your leadership. And it's just, I know I said it at the top of this, but it's very inspiring. And I'm just so happy that I got the chance to talk with you and hear all of your insightful responses. It makes a difference to hear someone know what they're talking about. It's so often that we don't hear what someone who knows what they're talking about and understands how intricate the system is. And it really is. I know a lot of people are going to be excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And then visit my website.
Yes.
Right. 2026sc.com. I need volunteers. I need donations. But most importantly, I need your vote on June 9th.
Awesome.